I should say at this point that we have the company of our two patrons, Dr. Biki Minyuku, the former chief executive to the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission by special appointment of Nelson Mandela himself. Speaking, he'll be joining us from South Africa. He's actually here. He will signal when he's ready to contribute, but maybe you would like to hear a few comments from the floor and to demonstrate that not all Britons are against us. Our patron, Joe Wealleans, has always been here by our side, all of our discussions. She too is here and will speak at an appropriate point. But let's open the mic at this point. I'm sure there will be comments. If you wish to make a comment, just signal with your hand and we'll call you through. My namesake, would you like to share some preliminary comments with us, some insights that you may share with us from our senior brothers, the ANC?
Well, good evening, good people. Good evening to you, to Joe, to every Fatherland Group member here. To the best of my recollection, this is not the first a conference that you have had at the beginning of the year about improving relationships between the Yoruba and the Igbo. And of course, all the nationalities, all the ethnic groups in Nigeria. My hope is that you will hold the next one perhaps in Nigeria itself at that moment that which would be appropriate. Frankly, it would have been good for me to hear the comments of the other people first that are part of the Fatherland Group and their thoughts about this happening each year. And consciousness needs to be raised back in Nigeria. Not that it is not necessary where we are as we speak right now. And my hope is that the next year and perhaps the next few following years, we might want to raise some consciousness right inside Nigeria. The relationships need to be improved there because that's the stepping stone, even for building good governance or even launching the orange philosophy itself, back home, where it should be as an example of what might even happen, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa itself, once we start leveraging on what is best for Africa as well. You're going to find that the Orange Union, pardon me for calling it the orange philosophy, because it is actually an approach for all of us to be able to regain our authenticity, because it actually speaks to our authenticity as Africans. Without our ethnic affiliations, we would actually be nothing. It speaks even to the constitutions that governs us. Now, my preliminary comments are to encourage us to keep on keeping on. It sounds like we are talking to ourselves, though. We need to be talking to the grassroots, to the rank and file. And if you look at the geopolitical influences of Africa now, and beyond that, just what is happening in Africa, the orange approach and orange philosophy and the Orange Union is needed in just about every other African country. Not because it's election time. If you look at what is happening across West Africa, even now, discussing this approach and the union itself, the Orange Union itself, is more important for people to build cross-functional relationships and strategic partnerships that work. I think we should not forget that building relationships is not just for fun. It is to make sure that we are good neighbors, and just like the sheet of that orange inside of that sheet. But it's equally important to look at what can be done with the orange rind itself, because you can have linoleum out of it to cleanse even the polluted relationships that exist, or even feed into the first industries that are needed for the development of Africa itself. Perhaps I should pause here, and it would be great to hear our other colleagues who are here. And thanks for the acknowledgement of the patrons themselves. And I imagine that Joe will be the sweeper as well.
Namesake, thank you for those preliminary comments. I'll bring you back later. And yes, we do have your counterparts, our lovely Britain. As I say, not all Britons are against us. There are some who have been for us, and Joe has certainly been steadfast in that respect, even though I blame her Labour Party for much of her troubles. But let's me not get party political. Joe, let's hear from you.
That's it. Here we go again. Good evening, everybody. Actually, Biki, are you still there? I wanted to ask you a question. Is Biki, can you hear me?
Very clearly, Joe. I can hear you, and I can see you as well.
Lovely to see you. Do you think, does South Africa need an Orange Union, do you think? Or does it already have one?
If I may, Joe, we have a semblance of one.
Right.
Even in terms of our constitution, I think we acknowledge the diversity, and we are inclusive, and we try to treat each other equally in terms of our constitutional dispensation. Perhaps I should say we have a semblance of it. It can be refined for the better, even though I think the British are trying to pollute our constitution all the time.
Right. Well, leaving aside the British, whoever they are, I don't know. Do you think, because we're looking for quick solutions here, you know, that we can pass on before we leave the planet, do you think, how far do you think the South African constitution could be adapted in line with what's proposed here? Do you think, can we use the South African constitution and just change the names? Is that any sort of a possibility?
I think it can be adjusted, and it can be amended to suit the needs. If we were looking at Nigeria as a case study, we should not take it hook, line, and sinker. Right. We should be able to adapt it to the environment back in Nigeria. By and large, it has the building blocks that you might find useful, particularly because our constitution does accommodate even the renegades. It accommodates everybody, including the people that you do not even want to think about. Just as an example, it accommodates and includes even the West of the Afrikaners, who actually didn't think that they can live in harmony with everybody. They are being accommodated in South Africa, and they claim the rights that the Constitution gives them. In fact, they claim the rights more than anyone else.
Yes.
They are being protected more than anyone else now. So I imagine this is why I'm saying we can adapt as to use the word that you used right at the beginning. You can adapt certain things to suit certain environments instead of taking it holistically. What are the things that I think should not be taken holistically? Is to make it too liberal to a point where it cannot be implementable.
Yes.
You do need to make sure that everybody has space and the opportunity to participate equally as human beings, as any other ethnic group that exists in Nigeria. Now, to the extent that you have a number of ethnic groups in Nigeria, it actually would make it even more practical, because then you can preach what you can follow, utilizing the orange approach very practically. So if I were to stop thinking, I would actually say let's use Nigeria as a case study to apply the orange approach, whilst we are learning and perhaps using the constitutionality of or our constitution in South Africa and any other constitution that we find relevant, and perhaps we take the best from the best that exist out there.
Yes, I thank you very much for that. That's more helpful than I could possibly have hoped. Dele, let's hear from you. What do you think of this idea, using the South African Constitution as a case study to, imagine that we are in a position to progress and actually implement a constitution in Nigeria? What do you think about that idea, Dele?
Thank you, Joe. It's actually an excellent question, and I should just signal to Justice that I've seen your hand up, and I'll call you in a moment. But I want to tackle this very point that Joe has pointed towards, and this is why we're very grateful for the input of my namesake, Dr. Minyuku, because one of the issues that pops up repeatedly in the Nigeria context is the suggestion, the belief that the Fulani ethnic group would never agree to the Orange Union. Now, I always smile when I hear that, because I position them in the same, I see them almost in the same light as the Afrikaners in South Africa, who were also in that, taking that position. That, as Dr. Minyuku just said, they thought they could not live with anybody else. But the Constitution addressed that, where if a Constitution speaks to everybody's interest and concerns, you'll find that it is the ultimate peacekeeping instrument. And the way the valuable lesson that Nigeria can learn is how the claim to exceptionalism of the Boers, the Afrikaans, was dealt with. My namesake perhaps should educate us on that.
Oh, well, if I may, my namesake, perhaps a friendly addition to what you have said. By the way, even from the Constitutional Assembly, many of you may have seen the pictures of the renegade Afrikaner group storming the very CODESA discussions that were bringing everybody to the table, because they didn't like that. And they actually stormed CODESA, and that's why there was CODESA 2, to be able to accommodate them as well. But they were not storming it to say it has excluded them. They just did not want to be part of even the Constitutional Assembly. Now, the one other thing that will perhaps interest you most, you're talking about the Fulanis. they can be likened to the Zulus. Remember, Gachaputele, as he walked out, did not want to participate in anything. As a leader of the Zulus, and we have always been given a wrong impression that is 6 million of them. And there have been 6 million since then. Look at it now. We are how many years now into it? And the Zulus under Jacob Zuma are still doing the same thing. They did not want, they think they are superior than anyone else. And this is some of the things that you need to be very much aware of. But that can be addressed. The issue is, this is really representative. It is integrated and integrative. It also must take into consideration for South Africa, the ground was laid not just by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in order to address the political conflicts that exist of the past, the present, and likely the future, but also undergirded by a constitutional assembly that involved everybody, every nationality, every ethnic group in your case, which is a nationality. Now, they will find themselves alone, if at all you started, but you keep on engaging them. And at the end of the day, they will find a reason to actually be part of the protection of the sheath of that orange, because they are just one segment of the orange. A complete picture of that orange, it includes the segments, and all of them, even the smallest of them, as small as a pinky, or the biggest of them as big as the middle finger or the thumb, it would find resonance inside and protection inside of that orange sheet. In fact, the orange approach is better than our approach because it protects everybody else. It makes them realize that we are part of a whole instead of being singular and thinking that we are better than the rest. Whether it's a small segment, the size of the pinky finger, it has the same value in terms of the vitamin C's that it carries as an orange segment.
My namesake, as only you could, the vitamin C of the orange that it will provide to all of us. Let me allow you to rest your voice a little, because we've got a couple of questions to come in, but I do have a question I'm going to come back to. Justice, you've had your hand up. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh, thank you very much, everyone. Good evening once again, noble people. We're trying to find a solution to our problems. Dele, I'm really grateful for outlining these dates, so it will stick in our heads a bit better than most of the history. I'm just going to back up what you said, which always enlightens me, going back to Winston Churchill, when he went to Roosevelt begging for arms in the Second World War. In fact, he had a myocardial infarction, had a heart attack, and any good doctor would have just grounded him, but he insisted on going smoking his pipe. It wouldn't happen these days. But he got away with it, got to America, persuaded Roosevelt to give them arms to allow Britain to survive the Second World War, on the proviso of the Atlantic Charter, which you quite rightly pointed out. But Winston's comment was that he didn't become the Queen's first prime minister, the first minister, a certain title they give the prime minister. He didn't become the King's first minister to give away the empire. That was his attitude. He wasn't really happy to comply. Nevertheless, Step Up to when Macmillan was going to South Africa to tell him about the wind of change, the need to hand over all these empires, which was actually causing all the wars. So Macmillan called in on, I think, Robertson in Nigeria and said, are these chaps ready? You can imagine the conversation. He said, of course, they're not ready. So, but if we don't give it to them, their independence, then we'll be in trouble. So we need to understand all this background, that Nigeria wasn't ready, and they knew it, but yet they have to, as you realize, strategically hand over those countries, empires, but still gaining from that handing over. Interestingly, you mentioned the oil was discovered in 1908, and they say that it's now we discovered in mercantile quantities in 1958. I don't know how mercantile it was since then till then. All we know is that in Igbo land, a place like called was a Shell Camp, massive land where they developed between Port Harcourt and Owerri, all huge land owned by Shell. We don't know what they were digging and drilling. So there's so many things which you pointed out, which I'm really impressed. Thank you for all that. Now, coming back to the group, the Fatherland Group, and the importance they need to play in understanding the dichotomy, the difference between the east and the west half of the southern Nigeria. I think we need to definitely tackle certain issues as a group. The wet year, which was happening in Western Nigeria, was actually stopped in its tracks by the so-called Igbo coup. And I think the first thing I'm appealing to this group is to let it be known that that wasn't an Igbo coup, because unfortunately you can't write it off people's minds. They still insist it's an Igbo coup. So I think this Fatherland Group need to make it known historically that this is not an Igbo coup. And if we can get that across, because the benefits of it was the stopping of wet year, people came back from Dahomey, because, as you said, it was like a civil war. Yoruba land was virtually inhabitable by what was going on. So people went to Dahomey to live. So after the coup, they were able to return. So Wetie was stopped in its tracks by the coup. And the most important thing about the coup is that not only did it stop the Wetie, it also released Awolowo from prison, because it wasn't General Gowan who gave it was Agi Renzi decided he should come out. Now the problem is that having allowed Wetie to stop and Awolowo to come out, and yet is labeled an Igbo coup. Even if it was, it means that the Igbo have actually done a lot to stop what was going on in the West. So it certainly wasn't an Igbo coup, but we need to know that there's a concern from the eastern half of the southern, what as you're describing, the southern part of Nigeria. There's an eastern wing that was very, very concerned about what was happening in the West, that they intervened and did what they can to stop it. And if you look at the election announcement and so on, the people from the East went to help when the election was being announced, being read and so on. But that's another story. So the Wetie and the coup, we need to really emphasize as a group that it's not an Igbo coup, because we have to study the evidence. And again, you touched about East and West. And during the war, when the war was actually going on, it was Banjo, who was a Westerner, a Yoruba guy who was going to the people of thought under Ojukwu's agreement to go and meet the Yoruba so that they will have this strong arm, East and West, uniting, or at least preventing the North from massacring one part, the Eastern wing, as you were describing it, of the Southern Alliance. So that's a Banjo going across with the Biafran troops that has been misunderstood as Biafrans invading the West. Again, as a Fatherland Group, we need to look into it and explain that if it was an invasion, then it would have been a lot more brutal than it was. That was led by a Yoruba person who was supposed to minimize the casualties, but you can't guarantee that in the war, I know. So there's a need to study and emphasize what was happening even during the war, an attempt to bring the East and West to confront the Northern attempt to completely destroy everything that Nigeria stands for. And Banjo's broadcast when he was in Benin was also something we should all study as a group, and where he emphasized that the Biafrans has every right to defend themselves and what was happening to them. And he was surprised that the Western countries who understand the importance of democracy and so on are in fact the ones fueling the whole thing. So Banjo's broadcast when he was in Benin, it's a Biafrans trying to encourage to try and bring the Western into the war also need to be studied as a group, and I don't know, and make sure we'll all understand that. I understand what we're trying to do by the Orange Union. I want to step aside from the Orange Union and say to us, is it possible for us to have Yoruba and whatever the nation is going to be called by Yoruba, are they within the Orange Union or outside, to start thinking about playing football with the Biafrans? Because when you just like you have in Britain, you have Wales, you have Ireland, you have Scotland. They all play football. They sit within. So there's a need to open up the possibility of even the Yoruba, the West and the East, having some, so ongoing friendly matches, friendly football, which may help to fuel our understanding instead of finding ourselves where those from the East find their houses and properties wrecked and destroyed in Lagos, for example, and a group like us, we're not speaking up. I think these things will help to cement our understanding of one another's pains. So I better stop there because the other things often allow other people to make contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice. Your points are noted. It is, I always say, the only bit of the Bible that I think I subscribe to, and I think is the Bible that it came from. The truth shall set you free.
Absolutely.
Those of you, the Christians, will understand that. That's the only bit that I really understand. The truth shall set you free. And that is the focus of the Fatherland Group, to get to the truth of the matter, especially in circumstances, as we know, where history is not taught. So everybody runs with their version of the events. And you are right. Based on my research, the tag Igbo, it was the BBC that first applied it, and it has stuck. It's in the nature of these things, that once a lie is told, it takes 1,000,000 years for the truth to catch up. But the truth is on its way to catching up. That it was not an Igbo. As regards who released our Lord, that's always another topic of contention. My research shows that it was not Ironsi, it was Gowon, and this is confirmed by Ojukwu himself in his book, because I am involved. So I always objectively take the issues and deal with them as I see them. And that is the process by which we'll get. But you're quite right, there must be a grown-up discussion. These are some of the lessons we can learn. And my namesake, Dr. Minyuku, will, I'm sure, pick this up in terms of the mature conversation that's necessary for us to move forward. It releases us if we can just take the facts as they are and not as we wish them to be. Let me, at this point, go back. I did have a question for my namesake. The Constitutional Assembly that South Africa had, how long did it take? You need to unmute yourself. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my namesake, it took, and I'm trying to recollect, roughly 5 years. Remember, we had an interim constitution. And before that interim constitution, there were what you're referring to as mature discussions that had to involve civil society, all political parties, you name it, all segments of the population. And the discussions happened from region to region. And some of the discussions were hosted on television and radio, some by way of papers that were written and submitted to that Constitutional Assembly. And then there was the Constitutional Assembly itself that developed the draft constitution first. At the same time, what was superimposed onto the Constitutional Assembly was the work of the Truth Commission in order to level the playing field about the political conflicts of the past. And the two worked hand in hand in preparation of the final constitution. So the final constitution was refined over a period of a year, but it had to be presented to some structures, including the constitutional court that was already established in order to be able to adopt the final constitution, let alone the other judicial structures that existed. So it took roughly a period of 5 years. Getting all the inputs from everybody took just about a year on its own before every input was engaged, deliberately engaged by representative groups that formed the Constitutional Assembly itself. Now, remember that South Africa was like the pariah of the world. And so everybody had to be deliberate about what we are doing. And nothing was left to chance. But complementary activities happened at the same time, parallel activities, like the Constitutional Assembly's work, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's work, had to happen parallel at the same time, so that nobody is left out. And nobody says, I'm the most insignificant one of the lot, or this is only meant for us. You know, because there were some people that thought this is for them. This is where things can be hijacked. I mean, even now we're talking elections, you'll notice that nobody talks about the Constitution, because the foundation, and I don't want to say it's the best, the foundation was solid. And every constitution is a working document, unlike the Bible. The Bible is fixed. It can be amended anytime. And it has taken that long up till now. We have not had any significant amendments. If you ask me, I can put amendments right now. We need to move away from the party political system to a constituency-based constitution, where everybody now can actually feel that they are part, instead of the leadership that represent their jacket in that parliament. And they are not accountable to anybody, but everyone is shouting the president must be accountable to them, whereas they are not accountable to anybody, because we elect parties in South Africa. That's one thing that like I said, you should adapt certain things rather than take it as it is. If you took that party political system, obviously you would need to amend it as you go on, because Nigeria is a bit sophisticated than South Africa. We are just a new democracy. You guys have been in it for a longer period to be able to look at the insides and of it all and actually make it work better.
My namesake, I think you're being over generous if you suggest that Nigeria's political system is more sophisticated than your own. We may have been at it for a long time, but we've been going round and round in circles rather than in a straightforward line. I see Patrick Akimbola's hand up. Please go ahead, unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Dele, for this very interesting, very relevant topic of discussion. I would like to just focus on the issue of the Northern hegemony relative to the model for the orange, this orange model you are proposing. I think this is a very significant variable that needs to be better understood. And I say that as someone who not only grew up a very significant part of the time I was in Nigeria, in the northern part of Nigeria, but someone who has also very closely followed a lot of the activities relative to the regional and other extraneous variables, which makes the Northern hegemony and its positioning around power a very significant nut to crack. And I say this because I know your desire is to truly problem solve. And a while back, I know you were on the YORUBA IGBO Day and you had the opportunity to break it down a little bit. And I noted some of the responses as we all try to develop a better understanding of what's going on. The truth of the matter is that the Fulanis have no land that they can call their native land. It's also true that they are spread around the West African Savannah region in a way where they are very historically well positioned. It's also true that a lot of their strategic thinking has been around being able to assure us dwindling resources have resulted in addition to security issues, have resulted in a mass descent on the southern part of Nigeria, which has further complicated the picture with regards to how Nigeria is really going to truly tease out itself from the situation it's in. And I only say this to say that these aren't issues that I think we can unload in a single meeting like this. We're talking about the word here and Biafra, for instance. And again, the point I'm making here essentially is, while I recognize and agree with you about equity and fairness being underpinnings around which a truly peaceful union can occur, there's some peculiarities about what was handed over to Nigeria, which has created the kind of crisis we're in at this time. And I think to be able to effectively unravel the situation, we'll need to be able to really do some, if you will, root cause analysis, where we can identify foundational issues that have made for the complicated scenario we have now, so that we can then systematically try to tease away what might be areas of differences, and then identify common areas around which both Biafra and Oduduwa, if that's what we're up for, and whatever. But at the end of the day, I do feel that there's a general consensus that something has to occur. The current system cannot cannot stand, and the issue now becomes, how do we transition from where we are right now to where we need to go. I don't think that it's inevitable that it has to result in violence as well. I think it's very simplistic thinking and lazy thinking, I would dare say, for anyone to think that we don't have more than enough precedent and examples of peaceful negotiated disentanglement, or if it's going to be one common union, it will be based on truly observable, a verifiable commitment to equity. I don't think the Northern hegemony is anywhere near trying to do that right now. I think with the mass exodus of a lot of professionals from the southern part of Nigeria, you do recognize that anything that's going to move us forward now would essentially have to factor into the equation the fact that there are a lot of very, very upset Nigerians who think that something has to give and are willing to go the extra mile to assure the status quo is not maintained. I thank you again anyway for this opportunity, and I encourage everyone that's on the panel to let us engage. We have no choice but to engage these issues. Thank you very much.
Patrick, thank you very much for that. All your comments are fully taken on board. You are so right that we do know that there is a special problem to be addressed, which is the Fulani factor. But you're also right that the intellectual material that we have, both with amongst Nigerians, well-meaning Nigerians, and with the support of our friends, like our patrons who are here with us, learn we don't have to reinvent the wheel. These problems and harder problems have been solved. And I always say that if there was one problem that looked insoluble, it was the problem of the Afrikaners in South Africa. And even as we speak, there is a similar problem that is about to unravel, that is about to be solved. And I speak of Palestine. I speak of Palestine and the Jews. Similar issues. Yes, not as many ethnic groups, but really encapsulating the challenge of how do you operate a democracy between two very opposite peoples on the basis of simple one man, one vote. The two-state solution that is being proposed is simply a small orange. That is what it is, essentially, is recognizing diversity. Stop the pretext that you're one people and all you have to do is line up and collect your PVCs and you vote, and that will produce this superman, superwoman who will be all things to all people. Again and again, the lessons from across the world are that human nature doesn't work that way. And it needs more intelligent design that will respect and embrace the differences rather than pretend that they're not there or resent them. This is essentially what the Orange Union is designed to achieve. So thank you very much, Patrick, for those insights. Joe, I see your hand up. You are ready to fire. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to make an observation about Gaza. As I am experiencing the fate of Gaza, it is the closest thing that I have seen to what I experienced as a young person in the case of Biafra. What you see happening to the people of Gaza, the way that it is happening, the excessive use of force against the vulnerable people and all the vulnerable people within it. That part of it is exactly Biafra. And we did not see as many pictures as we now see, but we saw enough pictures of starving people and starving children. And through yourself, Dele, and some of the research that you have done, and some of what my friend and colleague Timothy Modu has done and shared as well in many places, I came to understand that our dear Labour government was over providing arms to Nigeria with which to kill Biafrans. Now, I'm not sure if I can articulate what keeps forming in my mind about Nigeria, but it is to do with the level of oppression of the people within a land, the level of oppression within the land called Nigeria, however it got there. That's what we all grew up with, I believe. Because what was happening in South Africa, that actually at the time, one way to liberate ourselves was to call it Azania, was the name agreed amongst the exiles, I think. You know, we don't call it South Africa anymore. That's the name of the oppressors. We call it Azania, which is a more traditional name, I understand, although that may be Zulu or whatever it is, and others may object to that. But I'm getting away from my point, which is, in a way, the very profound nature of what went on in South Africa is what kind of forced eventually a conclusion and something like a solution, and the removal from power of white power. And what's interesting is to see that the earlier generation of white power, the Afrikaners, they are still inside the country, and they are very visible because they recognize themselves as having an ethnicity and a culture. Now, when I remarked before that I don't know who the British are, that was a bit of a reference to the fact that the British, especially the English, do not know that they have an ethnicity. They do not know that they have a culture. They think ethnic is everybody else, especially everybody with a particular, you know, a different skin color, even though they themselves spend lots of money turning themselves brown. When it comes to ethnicity, that's for brown people who didn't have to go on a tanning bench to get the color. You know, that's the idea that they have. So the British and the English. So maybe my part that I can play in this is to make the English make even more contribution. And I think I've already made by the promotion of things like Black Theatre in London and things like that, to get the English especially to understand that they have a culture and that it is no greater, no better, possibly no worse than other cultures. So to try and create an equality of culture. And that's where I see Nigerians are making huge advances, and it needs to be much more recognized that, and culture is being, cultural references from Nigeria, and I would say probably, I'm not sure how many ethnicities are represented in the fashion industry in this country, but I believe there are probably many. You know, daily art, these patterns and symbols are kind of being stolen to some extent. Although, as ever, Nigerians are there promoting their own wares and their own designs as themselves and getting recognized. But I still see that the ones that are recognized are, just like when I was at school, what they did was they singled you out. If you were a bit bright, they singled you out and they took you into their system, and then they imposed their different class culture on you. And that's exactly what they tried and failed to do in the empire. And this is what we're all living with, really. So, and you might notice that in this country, we don't have a written constitution, which might be, something else to sort of just think about as well. You know, how would it be? How is it if you don't actually have one? And why did we go to such lengths? Why did we go to such lengths to impose a constitution on Nigeria when we don't have one? Do you think there's a clue there to, the way that countries can still be dominated and used and exploited, and people distracted by politics and party politics, and meanwhile, the resources and everything valuable still being sucked out. So I'll shut up there now. Thank you.
Thank
If
you.
anybody's still awake after all that.
Thank you. Well, let's pop one particular myth that Britain does not have a written constitution. It does. It absolutely does. What it does not have is the constitution contained in a single consolidated form. But it does have, it has many strands, that constitution of theirs. It starts with the Magna Carta, that very ancient document, and it's been layered over the years by various constitutional documents. Now, what they haven't done, because it's on a need-to-know basis, the powers that be, the ones who exercise the levers of power, they don't want people to know the Constitution. So it's left all over the place. But the ones who need to know absolutely know every single piece of that constitutional jigsaw. Now, why they then, let me switch to the topic of why they were busy imposing constitutions on everybody else. It is because the Constitution is your framework. It frames the political arrangements, and it's like an architect that designs the structure of the building. And everything that follows comes from the design. So if you design it, if the architect designs it on the basis that she is going to live in that building, you'll find that it's very carefully thought through to enhance and maximize her experience from that building, as opposed to where it's for somebody else. Then it only goes as far as the money runs. So in the course of my research, I remember one particular phrase that stuck in my mind, which was in relation to, I think it was Alan Lennox Boyd, that they were referring to, that he was a master of the Constitutional Conference because he knew that it is at the Constitutional Conference that the outcome of the elections is determined, because the inputs drive the outputs. It's like programming. That is what constitution drafting is. You are programming. The new generation call it software engineering. This is software engineering in the political space. And the program that you write in that constitution will drive everything else that flows from it. And so therefore the fraudulent documents 1999 one in Nigeria that's masquerading as a constitution, they knew exactly what they wanted to put in there, such that when you look at the amending provisions in the 1999 document, it's easier to climb Everest than to scale the hurdles for any kind of serious amendment. It's deliberate, it's by design. And so these are valuable lessons that we're picking up from South Africa and from Britain. And what the essential point that I picked up from Dr. Minyuku's last submission is this, that everything depends on political will. If the political will is there, change becomes easy and possible. And there was a clear demonstration of that in the British context, when it was Tony Blair who introduced the various bills that created an assembly for the Welsh, that created a parliament for the Scottish, that created an assembly for the Northern Irish. Prior to that, I think it was the Gladstone government that created home rule for the people of the Republic of Ireland. So all of these things hinge on just the political will. Once the political will is there, the design side becomes possible. And as we've learned from Dr. Minyuku, that there were in their own case, there were so many tiers and layers going on simultaneously. But that was all possible because there was a favorable wind behind the exercise. Right now in Nigeria, there's a resistance. The wind is pushing against reform. That's what makes it difficult. We just need to turn the wind around. And that is going to be achieved by simply mobilizing the people towards the desire, the consensus for change. And thankfully, those in power at the moment, by virtue of the way that they are exercising power and managing our affairs, they're actually the biggest recruiters for people on our side who say we need to do something different. We cannot continue as we are. One of the points that I would like Dr. Minyuku to share with us, if you can, is how the delegates were selected for the constitutional conference. I understood from you that there was an interim constitution. This is following the fall of the white minority government. Where did that interim constitution come from that effectively held the fort, held the stage, whilst allowing the actual constitutional conference to run its course? I wonder if you could comment on that for us.
Yes, thank you, Dele. The same Constitutional Assembly produced the interim constitution. Let me go back a little bit. Already there were standing political parties within the apartheid system and government, but there were few. The Nationalist Party, the Progressive Party, you name it. And the rest of the people were in what was called homelands. If you were to think of it, is the same approach of Lagarde, trying to impose indirect rule, but forcing people to be ruled by the center, whereas the center is not holding. So when they created the Constitutional Assembly, a careful thought came into how you balance the power. And you even looked at the population dynamics as to which party has got more people that would now have representation, proportionate representation, which is bigger than a smaller population or a smaller party, so to speak. Now, for example, the ANC proportionally represented the rest of the country, not in terms of color, but the rest of the country in terms of ideological persuasion of wanting to see transformative change and development, and representing the colors of the rainbow, so to speak. You'll even recall Archbishop Tutu talking about the Rainbow Coalition, or a broad church within the ANC, metaphorically speaking. So the representative of that political party was, in terms of numbers, weightier. They had a weighting process for each party so that each party can be proportionately represented. So today it will make it even more difficult because you have individuals. The Constitution have allowed for individuals to run as independents. But the challenge with an individual running as an independent is, how is that person going to be operating in all the portfolios, the parties within the constitution itself, within parliament itself. If you are just one, you will not be able to be at every party at the same time. But the constitution allowed for that. So proportional representation is how they determined a formula was arrived at and negotiated that the smaller parties cannot have a big representation in the Constitutional Assembly. And by consensus, it is speaking to changing, remember, it is 79% of the population was run by 13% of the group who happened to be whites. Now you needed to change the formula altogether. But looking at every political party that existed and that wanted to be in parliament at the same time registered as a party. Then the homelands themselves, some of them fizzled out automatically. But the KwaZulu-Natal homeland, because it had numbers, I talked about the 6 million, that is neither here nor there, by the way. They felt, in fact, they wanted a federal state rather than a democratic state that our constitution is propagating. But they didn't want to participate in the Constitutional Assembly until it was made clear to them that they need to go and influence the decision in the Constitutional Assembly if they want a federal state. Because they cannot just say we want a federal state and therefore we are going to fight for it because we are bigger in numbers. You have to convince everybody there that it's a federal state that we need or a different model that's needed. And obviously, they will outvote you in a discussion of that nature, in practicing a new democratic order that we wanted. So every party, even civil society organizations, were represented in the Constitutional Assembly. Even institutions of higher learning. I'm afraid no football clubs was represented, but arts, culture, and sport plays a very important role, just like justice was actually indicating. You'll recall the words of Madiba, but by then we already had our constitution that we must use arts, culture, and sports, Joe, as you also mentioned, in order to cement the unification of a country now as a nation, now thinking together. We still don't have a national psyche. We still do not march to the same drum. You talked about Israel. It's amazing that the Christian Democratic Party supports Israel in South Africa. And then you realize we don't read the same Bible. Or if we read it quite differently. But they have the right to support Israel, except that the greater preponderance of people in South Africa feels that we cannot let the Palestinian suffer the same way as we suffered, because their destiny is intertwined with our destiny as coming from the same oppressive system. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it was proportional representation of each political party that has raised its hands and said, we want to participate in the Constitutional Assembly. The question was asked, how many people, rather than your jacket, are represented in your party? And you cannot then say, I have 100 people when another group has got 1 million people, and you then take the whole share of the votes. Just one slight thing that I know I'm pivoting out of it. By the way, there are good reasons why history is important. You would have noticed that Germany said it is on the side of Israel. And you would have known that Germany actually has perpetrated two serious genocides. One in Namibia during I believe it's 1900 to 1904, something like that, before the other Holocaust that we know, before the other genocide that we know. And it is Germany that stands today with Israel. But Belgium has taken a different and is singing a different tune. Remember that they also orchestrated a Holocaust in the DRC, a very serious one. Now imagine the French colonies in Africa. If all these countries can actually just rise up, I think the ICJ will be out of business because they wouldn't know what to do with all these things and reparations that are needed. Now, Germany has got convenient memory lapses. It doesn't think it is the one that perpetrated the Holocaust. It doesn't think so. But we cannot leave, and we cannot leave Britain as well, because Israel is what it is because of Balfour and Lagarde's policies, racial policies, that results in people being killed the way they are being killed even now. For the 77 years that they have put those policies in Palestine, the result is what everybody can see today, as Joe have said. But I'm pivoting only to say that the orange approach is needed across, because a lot of healing is needed in the entire continent of Africa, let alone in Israel alone. In fact, the irony is that it is Israel that is buttressing the owners of the land, Palestine, and even. But if we just said they are cleansing ethnically, that is a gross human rights violation that's not at the same level as genocide. If we just said they are doing ethnic cleansing, people will say, so what? But the whole world is watching and seeing what is happening. And anyway, that proportionate representation is exactly the parties that are now, but some of them have fizzled out. Some of them are no longer having, if you look at the PAC, the Pan-African Congress in South Africa, it has no less than 3 people in parliament. Yet ideologically, it's supposed to be the strongest in the whole world, but it doesn't have a followership. I hope I answered your question. And there is a formula for proportional representation because it's determined by the population grid of a country as well. Now you can imagine for Nigeria.
Thank you, namesake. You did address my questions. Thank you very much. Patrick, did you leave your hand up, or you have another comment to offer? Unmute yourself.
Yes, I did. Thank you
Okay,
very
go
much. I was just going to respectfully respond to Dr. Minyuku here, because these are very, very significant issues that he's raising, and we're talking about connecting the dots. I thought about the kind of unprecedented leadership that South Africa provided the Black world and progressives with what has just transpired. And when you look at the Nigerian experience of independence, and you also look at the South African experience, if you also are old enough to have some of the institutional memory with regards to the 70s and what we were doing in Nigeria, as part of the whole apartheid struggle right through to even the 80s. Suffice it to say that we didn't really get independence in Nigeria with all that transpired leading to 1960 and up till today. And so I say that just to encourage Dr. Dele that I would like to propose some kind of, there's a mouthful, there's a lot to unpack here. Let me just put it that way. And I think the danger would be to try to engage this all in one meeting like this. One of the points that I have been trying to impress is the fact that we're just about to get independence in Nigeria for the first time. If you've effectively straddled the diaspora and the homeland for some time and recognize the pain of actually doing that, and you'll understand what I mean. And this is the reason why the resolve of some of us that something has to give in Nigeria, otherwise it's a goner. You see, and I guess I say all this to say I'm very, very inspired by EFF and a lot of what's going on in South Africa. Because at the end of the day, look at South Africa today and you're asking yourself, what new paradigms do we need as a Black world? And in particular, the intellectual capital that Nigeria can bring to bear, even on the South Africa question, is significant. So I would just like to encourage, I'd definitely like to have more dialogue with your very, very esteemed panelists and guests who are at this meeting today. And we don't want to eat this elephant in one afternoon here. If we can take it one bite at a time, I'd definitely like to be part of that. Thank you.
Patrick, thank you very much. I did send you a message. I'm not sure if you are on the Fatherland Group platform, but do send me a message with your number so we can have you on board. Dr. Eke, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, it's good to see everybody on board. Thanking all the those on the panel, and all I want to say is two things. The first one is you've got the Fatherland Group introducing the Orange Union principle. Now we know that's a wonderful idea, and we're trying to get people to understand it better across the board. We also know that it's not an experiment in itself, because it's already been practiced in the past, and we have very similar models in places like the United Kingdom, European Union, even the Russian Federation. So it's something that's been practiced and it's working very well. The other thing I want to say is, in trying to move us forwards, bearing in mind we have so many ethnic nationalities, I think it's very important to impress on our people the seriousness of lifting their gaze, lifting their eyes up, away from the ongoing political pantomime. Because I think the ongoing politics and the political, arrangements and discussions and bantering, with regards to Nigeria, is a terrible distraction from our reality. And our people have to start looking away, completely away from that politics. And I suppose that's the first task from the individual, personal level. If you want to mature away from the bondage and find yourself into, the thinking potential, you're going to have to remove yourself from the ongoing politics you have to detach yourself from it, because it's one of those things that is leading us to nowhere. In fact, it's one of the instruments leading us in the wrong direction. And if people can mature away from it, then they can start thinking of the real solutions. And part of the problem is, when you talk about this, Igbo Yoruba conference, which I know the Fatherland Group obviously organizes a lot of other conferences for a lot of ethnic nationalities across the board as well. And you hear people, especially on social media, commenting. I know some of them are trolls, but some of them are people who are just sharing their views. And what they're saying is, well, I don't think we can collaborate. I don't think we can have anything to do with one another. I don't think we can, basically have any form of union or anything to do with one another. And they take this from the spite of the backdrop of political events that have happened recently, where you get the bile and bitterness which politicians use. So our people really need to come off that political bench and get them, detach themselves from the politics and start thinking of the real solutions. Because the reason I say this is we're talking about the grassroots now, because some of the intellectuals get the point. The grassroots are still looking up to politics and hoping for some sort of solution from politics that it will never come. So it's also training them to get themselves away from politics and start thinking about the solution. And we know that Orange Union is the solution, obviously, but it's telling people, number one, get yourself away from the politics. Stop getting involved in the politics. Just get away from it for a minute and think of the real solution. And then, of course, we can you can properly impress the Orange Union, onto them, because I don't think our people are totally stupid and don't get things. They're not, but they're being distracted, and they need to get that simple advice. And the biggest distraction is the politics, not necessarily the hunger. The hunger and all the other strives are a distraction, but the politics is perhaps the worst, because it gives people the impression that, oh, there is a government, oh, there is a constitution. There's absolutely nothing. That's the truth. And that's why nothing is ever delivered. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabriel. Very valid points indeed. They're actually gearing up for 2027 already, starting to talk about a mega party. That's the ones who so-called lost this time are going to get together and wrestle it back. But we'll be ready for them. Justice, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the invitation again. I think I forgot to mention that we should also look into this problem, population. Okay. What was it? Before independence, the Northern, I come back to the North and South, the Northerners thought they must secure 50% of the vote, of the seats in the assembly before they're allowed to join in the independence movement. As a result, Awolowo had to campaign in the north with helicopters and so on, but the Northerners didn't come anywhere near South to do their campaigning because they've already got the election in the bag. So, but after the independence, I believe there was a census, 62, 63 or whatever, and that's where the East and North unraveled, because the Northerners didn't believe that the Easterners had the guts to say, we don't believe your census report. We can't believe that what you're giving us as a number is what you have in the North. Because if I'm sure satellite imagery wasn't available then, but if you use satellite imagery, you find a lot of holes. And if you look at the map of this West Africa, it appears that people in the closer to the coast, the Atlantic coast, have more in population than those living in the Sahara, near the desert. So why is it that Nigeria seems to have more population in the north than further south? So that has been a problem in not only apportioning development and also how you go about running a country if we don't know the population, let alone proportionality, if you're going to design a constitution. And the last thing I want to comment is that you can have the best constitution in the world. If you haven't trained the manpower to read it and apply it, I think we're wasting our time. So that's all I'm thinking to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice. I see the owner of Techno Camon has got his hand up. I'm suspecting it's Pastor Denladi from Northern Nigeria. Techno Camon, unmute yourself and let's hear what you have to say.
All right. Are you hearing me?
Yes, and I'm thinking it is Pastor Danladi.
Yes, it's Pastor Danladi.
Please go ahead then. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Nigeria here is evening. I don't know. I'm not good in geography to know what is the weather or the time now in that areas all over the world now. I want to thank God for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this meeting. When I saw the caption of the Igbo Yoruba One Voice, today has been very, very hectic for me, and I was just eating. Immediately I just came home around 8 o'clock. I just saw you quickly join now, and immediately I saw this. I want to talk as from an insider from the north. I want to even say middle belt. This terrible challenge has informed this decision or discussion about Yoruba Igbo already. To me, our situation is not, and what happened in Lagos during this 2023 election about Yoruba and the Igbo saga in Lagos is, I saw it as like an adage in our people that if you see a bird dancing on the road, the person beating drum is in the bush. This country, these two words have been very irritating my mind. So since I grew up as a child, that before 1913, we were all here in the whole country, Africa. We don't have any problem. Somehow, some people just barricaded us and make us 55 countries. Then after some time, we now say that I got independent. That word annoyed me not be small. And when the independence came, now say that there are 3 major people in Nigeria. Yet in the whole world, about 7,100 or 200 languages, according to ethnology about in standard studies or in linguistic language studies. Nigeria tend to have the largest ethnic concentration all over the world. And somehow this body, by the gift that God has given us with our uncle man, Dele, who I have a friend called Dele Asaju. We have been friends. Every time he's in Jos, I'm in his place, he's in my place. He told me about Dele Asaju, Dele Fatherland. I don't even know his name. I just love the name Fatherland. Who missed the road before they were even ready. So when I saw this topic, Igbo Yoruba language, the pain started again. You see, these three Nigerian, for us to have arrived at there are three major languages in Nigeria. That is the beginning of our problem. And somebody was the one cooking and we are not fighting each other. And if you check that very situation, you see that the funny, corny way that it is these three languages. It is Hausa Fulani in one group, and then Igbo and Yoruba. Now, in the north, there is no human being that is double in this world. If a man, Hausa man, marry Fulani girl, that child in our creation setting in Africa, in Nigeria, he is a Hausa man. And if Igbo, if Fulani man marry a Hausa girl, the child is Fulani. It's not how Fulani. Now, how can the country, that person who did this trouble that we're not discussing today, Hausa, Igbo speaking one language, Igbo and Yoruba speaking language, you are not the one that caused it to. That man that is Hausa Fulani that struck it. Now them, one of them caused it. Today, in the Middle Belt, because of our standing, the Hausa are vehemently telling the world that it was the groundwork of that Fulani that was behind. And that man who told us that we are not independent and we were here, we didn't have, the River Niger was here before they were born. They now came and said they now discovered the River Niger. They are the one that caused this problem for us. And now we are having Orange Union that is a clear definition of everything. We are still having this thing. When I saw the name, the thing, I didn't know how to see. This same Hausa man, that Hausa Fulani man, one day stood up on 3rd February and told the whole world that there is a particular portion of that north. This time now, they didn't say House Igbo Yoruba, that it is a virgin land and there is 9 or 10 ethnic nationality living in the federal capital, political capital of Nigeria. But they told the world that it's virgin. Today we are stateless until this demonstration of this 2023 election that is trying to, the court now is trying to forcefully bring something now saying that Nigeria, the appeal court, Supreme Court have actually told the world now that we are 37 states. But somebody again, a Yoruba person, told me that that thing that was said, it was just for political purpose. As far as Nigeria is concerned, this place is still virgin. Nobody is existing here. And who is doing that? Somebody is behind beating the drum. And we're dancing this kind of thing. I want to pray that the Orange Union, I think this must be the best body. But how do we dismantle all these 55 that will go back to 1913 and start Nigeria and start our own continent over there? Or what? Or we'll make Nigeria and then all these artificial boundaries that have been created. I have plenty in my mind, but this is the list I want to say for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor. For those of you who don't know him, Pastor Danladi is from the Gwari ethnic group, who are the indigenes of what we know as Abuja.
Sir, let me give it very well, sir.
Yes.
My name is Pastor Danladi Jeji. I am the president of the original Inhabitants Development Association of the FCT. I am Baji by language, and there are other 9 languages here: Baji, Bari, Gede, Gana, Bandara, Basa, Ibera, Oro, Amama, and even Nupe are even in the FCT too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor. Well, you heard it direct there. At least 9 languages in Abuja alone, indigenous peoples. Joe, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes. Biki, are you still there?
He is.
Yes. Biki, you said that you think, if I heard you rightly, you said you think South Africa should move away from the party-based system and towards a constituency-based system. So I would like to know what would be the basis of the constituencies. Would it be geographical? Would it be ethnic? What would it be?
That's a question.
That's a great question, Joe. The ideal is it should be a combination of both. Because voting happens through precincts. So whatever precincts that are decided, you're going to have a combination of both. There is no situation where you'll find just a geographical setup. Of course, if I hear what is being discussed here, it looks like Northern Nigeria is a geographical setup for just my namesake. You need to help me. Is this for the Fulanis alone, or is this for the Fulanis and others?
Namesake, the Fulani are the, how shall I describe them? In relation to Northern Nigeria, I think you understand them best if you visualize them as the Boers.
Oh, no, I don't agree. I think maybe because they're not white, they are black people. I think, Vicky, maybe Zulu, I think, might be closest. They, have that fierce superiority thing about them. I would say, I don't know. Others, please argue.
All I was saying, it seems like there is a homogeneous group in the north.
No.
No, there is not.
No.
There's
No.
not.
Let me answer that question.
Please do.
Fulani is X. No Fulani in the Nigeria at all. But Hausa and other languages exist in Nigeria. But before the amalgamation, the Fulanis were here, tactfully did that work. And in connivance with that 1914 to 1960, by that time, the Fulani has penetrated with the colonial and the slavery and other kind of things. And then by the time Nigeria now was born, it now brought itself to say there are three major ethnic groups, Hausa, Fulani. Fulani don't have any place here. It was Hausa purely that are here. No Fulani place anywhere. And the same Fulani people now tell the whole world, because the system, those who discovered Vananja, that was here as if they were the creator of Africa, they are the one that made Fulani to tell the world that they are in all over the West Africa. The Fulani came from Futajala Highland, and Futajala Highland does not exist in Nigeria. So this is the challenge we have. So it's Hausa and other languages that are Nigerians, and now to say you want to say Yoruba Igbo to speak in one language, that is not Igbo Yoruba that divide ourselves. We have never had any problem. It's the Fulani that caused this problem. That's why they are afraid about Igbo man to come to help us unite, to move together, and keep on pointing their error as if they are angels and they are the most terrible human being that doesn't want people to have business.
Thank you, Pastor. I think, Dr. Minyuku, the best way to understand it is this. Of the 371 identified ethnic groups that make up Nigeria, probably 350 of them are in northern Nigeria. Does that give you a sense?
Yeah. Thank you. But the ideal situation is to be able to accommodate all of them. If you think of all of them as ethnic groups, it means they need to be accommodated in a system. And they need to be recognized. They need, just like any other ethnic group, however small it might be, they would need to be recognized. They need to be accommodated. There is no holier and bigger than thou in a system of the orange approach. All of them are of equal value in building a nation. My apologies in conflating the two. I think I need to take an excursion next time and be in the north and see if I'll be welcome.
Please,
I'm sure you will. I'm
sir,
sure you will.
Dr. Dele, please, let me answer my brother, sir. You see, this approach is very good. I want to say something. The word he has used, accommodate. The 378 or so languages, the word accommodation didn't even originate from us. We have been here. There was nothing like no accommodation. It is a Fulani that caused the problem of accommodation. We have never done anything. The only thing we did to ourselves was to either fight about marriage, or you enter my farm and I enter your farm. That's all. And after small talk, and everybody will go his find his own way. There is nothing about accommodation. Now, the worst thing is that even our Nigerian currency, the Fulani that they don't have anything in this country, the denomination of our currency, you see a cow inside our currency, and there's and a man standing with a stick, and he has no land in the place. Can you imagine? And then the Igbo who have here and Yorubas, the Hausa, even in the currency, it's only Hausa, Igbo, Hausa. There is no Fulani. But then they will not tell you there are 3 languages in Nigeria, Hausa, Fulani, but there is no Fulani anywhere. But they appear in the picture. And even trying to make our Nigerian passport to be a Fulani and cattle. As if we didn't have cattle, as if Nigeria is the only one that have cattle. Like the whole world don't get cattle, only Fulani get cattle in Nigeria. Which kind of thing is this? Please, nothing there like this. Now Fulani cause this problem. Yoruba, we never have any trouble. We are together. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. As we're running out of time, let me take Patrick's comments.
Yeah, let me take off from just making the point that Nigeria is the only country where Fulanis as a minority rule. So I want us to just kind of hold on to that, because that wasn't the reason I raised my hand. I wanted to respond to Pastor Danladi with regards to the issue of the other minorities and this whole thing with the dominant, non-dominant. Up till now, the tendency has been for the Biafran agitators and the Yorubas to approach their self-determination in what I feel has been less than sufficient engagement with the other indigenous populations. And, this is something that obviously, if we're going to unpack this at some later time, I just wanted us to pay attention to, because it's our ability to be able to really incorporate a non-violent, negotiated dissolution, or if it is a reconfiguration based on some minimum equity of some sort, it will still mean that we're all kind of essentially looking at a round table where equity, the kind of required equity occurs. And in the past, I've had difficulty getting even minorities who are agitating for self-determination haven't sufficiently, in my own view, recognized that the most logical pathway for us would be to essentially guarantee the minimum rights among ourselves and carry at least as much as possible everyone who thinks that's the direction we need to go. So I would at least like us to unpack a subject like this, because to the extent that we can have dialogue where we are building that understanding. Dr. Eke is right on point with the point he made also with regards to all of that politics and being able to get people to pivot to where we want them. But that process of getting them to pivot, in my own view, requires a preliminary step where essentially they are probably going to, first of all, go to some level of recognition of their own indigenous identity and its validity, so that by the time you are all essentially engaging the nation formation or whatever, then you can probably more easily assure some minimum safeguards. The Fulanis have not shown a disposition where I would say that anyone who has any experience with them and Takia, among other deceits, would say that they, in good faith, they will sign something and they are assured that they can go to sleep. And this is why I guess I kind of feel very strongly that this is a very important meeting we are having today, because of course we are sowing the seeds for, I hope, what would be further deliberation. But people like Pastor Danladi need to be assured that we all are on the same side of this thing, and the sooner we really begin to bring them up aboard as equal partners, the better. I am a strong advocate for Yoruba nation, for instance, but I'm also a very, very strong Pan-Africanist. And when I look at my experience in the 70s as an ardent Pan-Africanist right up to this time, people are wondering, why are you suddenly talking Yoruba nation? So we need to negotiate that. And for me, negotiating that means that we are looking at indigenous populations. We are looking at the power displacement that has occurred based on that kind of Fulani infusion, the entrenched nature of that embeddedness, and that really is probably the main thing to worry about. They are playing chess and we are playing checkers. This is what I say very often on a lot of platforms where I perform, because when you listen to the kind of very elementary dialogue we're having at times about some of these issues, and you juxtapose it with some of the serious strategic work that those that would like to maintain the status quo are working on, then you do recognize why engaging people like Pastor Danladi, sitting with them and really getting them to break down for you what their own perception of the pathway is, such that we can build those interdependencies. That to me at least would bring the orange formula really to life as you want it. You need to operationalize it, and in order to operationalize it, it means that we will just have to be able to take it through the people and get this kind of synergy to result in consensus as to a common way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Do you please, as I said, send your number to Dr. Eke, who's
I'll do that.
Who's leading the Orange Union thinking in terms of fleshing it out. Now, I would like closing comments from Joe and Dr. Minyuku. Dr. Minyuku, I have a specific one for you to address. I sent you an article that was titled "The Virtue of Ethnocentrism." I want to hear what you made of that, because it really did seem to speak to the Orange Union concept, in my understanding. And so we'll then take Joe's closing remarks. So, Dr. Minyuku.
If I may, it speaks to what actually the pastor and Gabriel has also said, that article, without labels and what have you. The value add that one can make to it is the fact that there has to be some acknowledgement before recognition. And I think it has been made very clear by Mr. Gabriel that there has to be some preliminary steps that are done, even some forensic audit of sorts, where you acknowledge all the groups, but they themselves need to even recognize themselves as who they are, so that they can be accommodated in the Orange approach. But what is of importance to note as my parting shot is that what cuts across the Orange approach is what I would call the diconfluence, which emphasizes diversity, inclusivity, and equality. Again, these are the same principles that I believe everybody is mentioning here that needs to be taken into consideration, so that you don't leave, there are no significant ones of a lot. Everybody is significant, rather than others being more significant than others, as if this is an animal farm. We are talking about recognizing the dignity and the humanity, the common humanity and dignity of the ethnic groups. And even the ethnic groups, by definition, becomes nationalities who are in geographic spaces. But at the same time, those geographic spaces could be, you could have districts, you could have municipalities within them. And how you're going to really apportion it for governance sakes and for the allocation of resources for development will depend on the activeness of those groups. And the issue of equality, I think Gabriel talks equity, which is different from equality as well. But the issue of equality itself is more inclusive and more embracing, unless you want to fight battles of ifs, where you find that you're leaving out women, where you find that you're leaving out youth, where you find that you're leaving out senior citizens who are equally contributors of a society. You need to be inclusive, you need to be integrative. And I think that's the value of the Orange Union. I think we should also think of it as an approach so that you can implement it. We should also think about models that can complement it in order to make it implementable and more valuable to end up even with a constitution that you can implement, rather than a hodgepodge of a constitution.
I was saying that I was watching a video earlier today, which featured the return of the members of the South African legal team from the International Court of Justice. And I saw the way they were welcomed back as conquering heroes. I wonder if you could give us a sense of the mood of South Africans at the moment, in light of this major strategic move made by your country. And in the process, if you could comment, because I know elections are in prospect in South Africa, the outlook and possible impact on those elections for the ANC, who I know have been going through some difficult challenges lately. Could you comment on
that? My namesake, I don't know if you can hear me, but yes,
South Africa, we can hear you.
Yeah, in South Africa now, this is election year. One of our colleagues here said they favor EFF, so I need to be careful what I say. But it's all in the spirit. EFF is the baby of the ANC. Remember, Julius actually was the president of the ANC Youth League until he misbehaved. But here is the reality. The case that has been made by our government, and in essence, the African National Congress, the case that has been made against Israel on behalf of the Palestinians, speaks to two little but very significant things. Whether the ICJ makes a decision or not, we live in a moral universe. It has made it very clear that in the moral universe, as Martin Luther King Jr. has said, the arc of the moral universe always bends towards justice. Now, whether the judges there are going to decide otherwise, that's why earlier on I said they will be actually voting themselves out of that court, whatever decision they were to make. That is an antithesis or anathema to the plight of the Palestinian people. Now, yes, it has put South Africa and the African National Congress on some stars. If we can say in the atmosphere, South Africa has taken what no other country wanted to take. In other words, South Africa has said no to the bullies of this world, no to the bullies in a human rights culture now, and to the bullies that wants to do things with impunity, including just killing people at random, like Israel is doing with impunity to the Palestinians. Now, that on its own increases the stocks of the ANC on one side and our government on the other, even on the world platforms. It's more than just bravery. It's principles that actually are needed. South Africa has said what many people didn't want to say or they were afraid to say against Israel. Now, I don't think that's going to add much to the elections. I just think it indicates how the moral universe is right now. But if you consider the fact that the Islamic states have joined now the South Africans' position, and if you consider that beyond the Islamic states, you are talking about the Arab League countries as well, by themselves, they are the neighbors of Israel. Now, for Israel to turn around and say that we haven't made a case, we haven't declared even a dispute with them, it makes no sense. And I think I would want to align myself with Joan to say that actually it makes them to be so immoral that they do not think about a common humanity with the rest of the world. Now, by the way, they think of South Africa as monkeys. Now, they have a dispute with me because I'm not a monkey. They think of us as useless people. They think of Palestinians as animals. Now, think about what happened to Rwanda, because people were regarded as cockroaches to be crushed. And then you had genocide happening. Then you're having genocide happening in Israel. Now, it's interesting that the political parties, of course, before I go to the political parties in South Africa, Israel on its own thinks it is Hamas that is perpetrating genocide on Israelis. Now, how strange is that? Feed them with oranges. It means their outspent oranges in Israel are no longer having vitamin to stimulate their cells to think properly for a change. Now, but they really have lost it as far as we are concerned. Now, whether the Hague decide on behalf of the Palestinians, it's not on behalf of South Africa, it's on behalf of the Palestinians. Whether they decide positively or negatively, the case has been made that in any moral universe, that arc always tends to justice. But it only does that if we pull it towards justice. And South Africa, in a way, has done just that. But it's not South Africa alone now. I think the countries that are supporting that action are in the hundreds now. Now, can South Africa, or rather, can the ANC capitalize on that towards its elections? The ANC cannot play politics with the lives of the Palestinians. In any struggle of that nature, we have to maintain our calmness and coolness to stick to the principles, because that is the same struggle that South Africa was involved in South Africa as well. When we argued there was genocide in South Africa, they said it's a numbers game. How many people have been killed like that by the apartheid system? Now, I would want to say that any government that can capitalize on the shall I say, the demise of another country and another group, it is not worth its salt. Now, of course, you'll see the other side of it. If the ICJ can rule against the charges against the Israeli government, and this is not the Israeli people, the Israeli government officials that has been enumerated in there, if they can make a decision in favor of them, you're going to see political parties in South Africa actually crucifying the ANC. But you will not see the ANC capitalizing on that moral high ground that the ANC have taken. It could have been taken by individuals. It could have been taken by any government, including the governments that are supporting now. If you add the countries that are supporting that, it's over 100. As I said, even France, even Belgium, even the likes of Britain, that we didn't think it can take a decision to unwind its coil, that it has created in Palestine. They are already thinking that they shouldn't be left alone. They should be part of the moral universe that we are talking about. Now, the moral universe and the justiciable cause that South Africa has shown is because of the scars that we have after struggling against apartheid. And the scars we wear with pride. We will take it for any other Palestinian in the world and do it again and again and again. But we cannot now capitalize at it and say, the world, look at us now. We have done what anyone could have done. Now we need to be elected. Now we still have to work and go house to house, community, every way in South Africa, every inch of South Africa, to make our case to govern this nation. And I'm afraid there is no other party. Of course, the ANC, we don't think of the ANC as a party. It is a movement. There is no other movement like that in South Africa. Now, we think that if you look at the past 30 years in South Africa, a lot still has to be done. And in essence, quite a lot has not been achieved. But one of our comrades here mentioned that we were fortunate to have leaders like your Nelson Mandela with foresight, who even during his time, he didn't care. He's in the heart of the beast in the USA. He still said Palestine is part of us. Arafat is part of us. His struggle is our struggle. Now, I know I'm not answering your question. That's because I'm not a politician. Dr. Eke said we must move away from politics, didn't he? But the reality is that the moral universe exists for me, my namesake. It exists for you. It exists for everyone here, including the good pastor who was speaking here. And that arc will always move towards justice. It will even help Nigeria get back all the monies that have been lost with the PNA case, if I may say so.
My namesake, we never get enough of you. Once you're in the flow and in the zone, it is absolutely incredible. Joe, I'd like to have your closing comments as well, please.
Well, thank you. And Biki, thank you so much for that summary that you just gave just now in answer to Dele's question. Because it's so great for me to have you, a real South African person here, so that I can feel that I am sending a message to South Africa that I could not otherwise send, to say and let the government of South Africa know, government of South Africa, you lifted my heart. You spoke for me when you went to the International Court of Justice. I went with you every step of the way. And I'm sure that all of us who were involved in whatever way in the anti-apartheid struggles, I'm sure my heart was not the only heart in the UK that was lifted and carried. And still, you carried the torch for us. I mean, you might say once we tried to carry the flag for you, to raise your flag and shift the oppression off you. And now you are doing it for us, because our governments have disabled themselves, they have disabled themselves across almost the world, So now, coming back to our task in this group to try and see if a better constitution will bring a better country in Nigeria, there are two areas that I think we must look at in that connection. And one is how to mediate the relationship between the individual and the state at whatever level of state we are talking about, whether it is local or regional or national. And in its own way, the Constitution of Nigeria, the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria, the paragraphs on individuals in some ways could not be better. So it may be useful to lift some of them, knock them out of the framework that seems to be disabling that heroic possibility, because it is that relationship, the relationship between the state and the individual, is what underpins, for example, or is meant to underpin the French Constitution. I would not say our Constitution, because I still disagree with you, Dele. We do not have a written constitution. I don't have a written constitution. Why? Because the constitutional paraphernalia that you refer to is the constitutional paraphernalia of the rich and powerful, the handful of people the barons of England, on whom the King of England, newly invented thing, King of England, depended, They wrote the Magna Carta. It's quite good, but it could be better. So that's one area, the relationship. How would we mediate the relationship between the individual and the state, whatever size or basis of state we're talking about? And the other thing is, I'm thinking particularly my impression of northern Nigeria, particularly from witnessing the kind of adulation of Buhari when Buhari traveled around North Nigeria. And he said, what do I say to all these young people? All these young people are looking to me. What do I say to them? Now, that's one thing, but I think what underpins that kind of attitude is an area that we have not really spoken about, but which we must, which is the area of religion and faith. And I make a distinction between religion and faith, because faith is one kind of thing that an individual can relate to in their own way, but religion is organized religion. So, for example, right here in North London, exactly where I live, there are a lot of Orthodox Jewish community, and most of them, almost all of them, vote according to what the rabbi tells them to vote. So that is how close that connection still is. And being me and being free, woman child of the 60s, I do manage to talk to some of these people. So two young Orthodox Jewish men actually stopped me in the street the other day and spoke to me, which is a very extraordinary experience. And they didn't say very much, but they asked me if I was Jewish, because I once wished them, Happy Hanukkah, I think, or something like that, and they remembered it. So I said, no, I'm not. They said, Church of England or whatever, And then one of them said to me, and I said something about it's oh, they said it's a more liberal church. I said, well, perhaps it's part of a tradition where people are encouraged to think for themselves. And one young man said, I don't like to think for myself. The rabbis have, they've been understanding things for billions of years, so I prefer to listen to them. I doesn't like to think for himself. So that's one kind of individual, and it's a choice. I think the key thing for people to know is that there is a choice, you know, and people are telling you in Russia and China that in some, I've actually heard a Russian person say, we prefer to have this sort of system because we can just get on and enjoy ourselves, and we leave it all to the, you know, the people in the Kremlin, and they get on with all the politics, and we just, you know, have a nice life. That's another, you know, kind of choice. So those are two areas: individual and the state, faith and religion, and the influence of that, particularly in northern Nigeria. It's a form of organization that is very, I believe it's very prevalent, and we need to get our heads around that at some point, I think. And thank you so much, Dele, and thank you, everybody. It was not easy getting into this tonight after a busy day on many other things, but thank you very much, because it has, you know, opened up the mind. It's been great to hear what people have said, and especially thanks again to our brother in South Africa.
Joe, thank you so very much for those comments. I mean, we learn so much when we gather like this, and Dr. Minyuku is quite right. Yes, we do okay on the virtual, but I just can't wait until we do the in-person, the absolute in-person. And it may be next year, because next year will be the 5th anniversary of the Igbo and Yoruba speaking with one voice. And it may be an appropriate time to get it at a physical level. You've very helpfully clarified the point that divides us in relation to whether Britain has a written constitution or not. I think where I agree with you is that the constitution which Britain has is a bit like the 1999 fraud that Nigeria has, in the sense that it's not the act of the people. It was dropped down from on high. So maybe it's not that it's written, it's not that aspect, it's whether it's actually a people's constitution. Indeed, whether it is a constitution, because if the essence of a constitution is an agreement made by the people who are going to be governed by that instrument, then Britain is in the same position as Nigeria, that we don't have a constitution, not one that's made by our people. Now, you very helpfully reminded us about the connection between the events that we've been seeing in Palestine, the slaughter of the Palestinians by the super powerful states, and how that brought back memories of Biafra. And that was very, very powerful reminder about what Biafra was all about. I definitely take that away. Dr. Minyuku, this moral universe that you spoke of, and the arc that links this in, it's remarkable the way that events and our discussions have linked the apartheid struggle, or the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, with the current struggle between another apartheid state, Israel, against the Palestinians. And then we heard a little bit from our friend Pastor Dan Laddie in terms of the Nigeria dimension. And we saw just before Christmas, we didn't touch on it, just before Christmas Day, the slaughter of something like 160 or 200 Christians in Plateau State, in very similar circumstances where to what we're observing in Palestine and what we observed in South Africa, the Sharperville massacre and all the rest of that. So there is that arc that is linking these events. And there's a common theme that, of course, runs through it, which is the bad Britons, because it is, whether you start in South Africa, or you go to Israel, or you go to Nigeria, it is those British colonialists, the same ones who dropped the constitution on the ordinary British people. That is a thread that runs through the whole thing. And as I said in my presentation, today is the 15th of January 2024. And the message we wanted to get across is how the 15th of January links the Yoruba and the Igbos. That 15th of January 1956 was when the oil was not discovered, when they confessed that the oil was there. And that really is the root of our troubles in terms of the constitutional design that they then came up with in order to hold on, because it's naive to think that having discovered the oil in 1956, they were simply going to walk away from it in 1960. Say, oh, too late. We've said we're going. We're going. Without question, the whole constitutional arrangement that they dropped on us was designed to ensure that they were seen to be letting go without actually letting go. And that's what took us then to the 15th of January 1966, that first coup. And hopefully from the presentation today, we now see that it was two-dimensional. It was the end of the troubles in the Western region, Wealleans, that had been running since October 1965, those regional elections. The declaration of martial law that came with that coup ended the Western region crisis. But it was because it was labeled an Igbo coup, it was the beginning of the Eastern regions, and in particular the Igbo's tribulations. So we are connected. Those, although people may seek to deny it, those of us who've investigated and researched this thing can see that we are joined at the hip by that date, 15th of January. And it was 15th of January 1970 that finally the troubles, at least the immediate troubles of the East, came to an end. So that is the reason why the 15th of January every year, it is our date, is the date on which we try and repair the relationship which was deliberately fractured in order that they could have continued access to that oil that they did not wish to leave behind. I want to thank everybody who has participated in the discussions this evening. They've been so enriching, so much learning, so much promise and positivity in terms of the greater clarity as to the way forward. I want to thank our patrons in particular. Joe Wealleans, thank you so very much. You have done so much to repair what your Labour Party, the troubles that they caused. If only you had been the Prime Minister instead of Harold Wilson, we would not have half the troubles that we have now. And my namesake, Dr. Biki Minyuku, always a delight, always generous with the lessons from South Africa. We may be called the giants of Africa, but that is only in physical terms, in terms of land mass and population. The true giants are undoubtedly your people of South Africa. You've demonstrated it again. Where others failed to tread, where Nigeria failed to go in terms of standing up on the side of those who were being bullied, it was South Africa that jumped into the ring. And it's no wonder that your people, your lawyers, got such an ovation as they were coming back. And if they could hear the ovation that we give to them, all Nigerians, all well-meaning Nigerians, we take this opportunity, as Joe said, to say thank you, thank your people, thank the ANC, and in particular, if you could get a word to that your foreign minister, the lady. Oh my goodness! Each time she speaks, my soul is on fire. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody. Wishing you all a happy new year, successful 2024. And we look forward to the next seminar conference online, which will be the one where we bring back our people from the Middle Belt who think that we neglect them. We do not. This one is simply because we know that, as both Ojukwu mentioned and as Awolowo mentioned, that if this fractured relationship can be repaired, despite the efforts of those who want to keep us divided, if we can rebuild the bridge, then we're in a position to help our brothers and sisters in the Middle Belt and in other parts of the North. Thank you all very much, and have a good night. Thank you. And thank you, Bonny.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.